He was paid to have her on his arm, but when she disappeared, the billionaire couldn't get her out of his head. He paid her for a fantasy, but one look was all it took for the fantasy to become real. The billionaire, accustomed to controlling everything, never saw that the woman he pulled from the streets was, in fact, the only one capable of unmasking his world, and perhaps of saving him from it. Sorry to interrupt your story, but if you love this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe. Help us grow this channel, and may that good karma come back to you tenfold. Thanks and enjoy the show. Sebastian Sterling's glass penthouse ruled over the Manhattan skyline like a throne of ice. From there, at 42, he controlled a real estate empire valued in the billions. His collection of Swiss watches, his Italian handmade suits, his fleet of sports cars, everything was calculated to project power. Tonight, however, for the first time in years, Sebastian Sterling had lost control. Are you telling me that no one is available? Not a single person? His voice cut through the air of his mahogany-paneled office like a razor. Jenna, his personal assistant, maintained her composure. After 5 years working for him, she was used to his outbursts. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. Every top-tier companion from the agency is booked solid for New York Fashion Week. The few who were free are all down with this flu that's going around." Sebastian stopped in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. New York City spread out below him, a sea of glittering lights in the twilight. The Metropolitan Museum of Art glowed in the distance, where the annual charity gala, the most exclusive event of the year, would be held tomorrow. It was his only chance to get close to Jonathan Vance, the majority shareholder of Vance Global Energy. "Without that deal with Vance, I'll lose the bid for the Hudson Yards development." Sebastian slammed his fist against the glass. "And I need a date. Vance respects men with beautiful women at their side. It's old-fashioned, but that's how it is." Jenna nodded silently. She knew the unwritten rules of New York's high-stakes business world. "There has to be someone," Sebastian muttered to himself. Hours later, desperation guiding his hands on the wheel, Sebastian was driving his Range Rover through the streets of the South Bronx, a neighborhood he would never have visited under normal circumstances. Rain fell softly on the windshield as he passed a small homeless shelter, and that's when he saw her. Under the dim light of a street lamp, a young woman was handing out coffee and donuts to a group of elderly people. It wasn't her beauty that caught his attention, though she was beautiful. Jet black hair pulled back in a messy braid, warm cinnamon skin, and features that held a classic, striking beauty. It was the way she moved, with a natural grace that didn't fit her surroundings, her worn-out clothes or her hands calloused from hard work. Sebastian parked and got out, ignoring the fine mist. He approached with determination. The old folks eyed him with suspicion. His designer suit and watch were worth more than everything they owned combined. "Excuse me," he said, addressing the young woman directly. His voice, used to barking orders in boardrooms, sounded strangely uncertain. She looked up. Her eyes, an unusual amber, sized him up with a mix of caution and defiance. "Can I help you?" she asked, with a dignity that threw him off. "I need to speak with you," Sebastian replied, glancing meaningfully at their surroundings. In private, the elderly people tensed, protective. One of them, his face etched with wrinkles as deep as the canyons of Arizona, limped closer. "Izzy, todo bien?" he asked in rapid, concerned Spanish that Sebastian couldn't follow. "Sí, Mr. Ellis, no se preocupe," she replied in the same language before turning back to Sebastian. 5 minutes, not one more." They moved under a small awning that shielded them from the rain. Up close, Sebastian noticed details he had missed: the fine scar that crossed her left eyebrow, the tension in her jaw, the carefully sewn patch on her worn sweater. "I need an escort for an important event tomorrow night," Sebastian said without preamble. "The charity gala at the Met. I'll pay well." The woman's expression shifted from surprise to outrage. She straightened her back, suddenly seeming taller, more imposing. "Are you mistaking me for some kind of—" Her voice trembled with restrained anger. $20,000, Sebastian interrupted. "For one night. You just have to accompany me, make conversation, maybe dance. Nothing more." The young woman stared at him, her eyes flashing with fury. But Sebastian saw something else there. Calculation, consideration, need. 25,000, she said finally. "And I want half up front." Sebastian couldn't help but smile. Whoever this woman was, she had guts. "Done. My name is Sebastian Sterling." "Isabella Monroe," she replied, not offering her hand. And I'm not the kind of woman you think I am, Mr. Sterling, but I need the money. The rain picked up, drumming on the metal awning. In the distance, an ambulance siren tore through the night. Sebastian watched Isabella more closely. There was something about her he couldn't place, an innate elegance in the way she held her chin, in how she articulated every word. This was not just any woman who'd fallen on hard times. "Why are you accepting?" he asked, genuinely curious. Isabella glanced toward the shelter, where the elderly residents watched her with concern. "The shelter's roof is leaking. Mr. Ellis needs his diabetes medication. Mrs. Peterson lost her glasses last week." She paused, her eyes meeting Sebastian's with a silent challenge. "Is that enough for you?" Sebastian was speechless. In his world, people did anything for money. They lied, betrayed, humiliated themselves. But this woman who had nothing was negotiating with dignity, and for others. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m., he said, handing her a card with his address. "I'll send a car." When Sebastian returned to his Range Rover, the rain had stopped. Through the windshield, he watched Isabella go back to the elderly people who surrounded her with questions he couldn't hear. He saw her discreetly slip several bills into the pocket of the old man she had called Mr. Ellis. He started the engine, but couldn't pull his eyes from the rearview mirror until he turned the corner. For the first time in a long time, Sebastian Sterling, the man who planned every move with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, had acted on impulse. And as he drove away from the Bronx toward the skyscrapers of Midtown, a strange unease settled in his chest. He had just changed the course of his life, but he didn't know it yet. At 10 o'clock sharp, a black Cadillac Escalade pulled up in front of the Bronx shelter. Isabella was waiting on the sidewalk with a small, worn fabric bag, the only luggage she owned. She wore clean but faded jeans and a simple blouse, the best she could find. The driver, a man with an impassive expression, opened the rear door for her. "Good morning, Miss Monroe. Mr. Sterling is waiting for you." During the drive, Isabella watched the city's changing landscape with hungry eyes. The narrow, bustling streets of the Bronx gave way to the wide avenues of the Upper East Side, then to the stately mansions lining Fifth Avenue. It was like crossing invisible borders, each one marking a different New York. The vehicle stopped in front of a glass building on Madison Avenue, the most exclusive street in the city. In the lobby, Sebastian Sterling was waiting, impeccable in a navy blue suit that probably cost more than a year's rent for the entire shelter. "Good morning, Isabella." His voice was professional, as if they were starting a business transaction. "We have a busy day ahead." Without further ado, he led her to a boutique where saleswomen with rehearsed smiles greeted them with champagne and strawberries. Isabella noticed their discreet glances, sizing up her worn clothes and unmanicured hands. "She needs a complete wardrobe," Sebastian instructed the manager. "An evening gown for tonight and several additional outfits." He turned to Isabella with a neutral expression. "Choose whatever you like. Price is not an object." Then he sat on a velvet sofa, took out his phone and began answering emails, as if the situation were completely routine. The saleswomen led Isabella to the dressing rooms, offering her designs that cost more than everything she had ever owned. At first she felt intimidated, but when the first garment touched her skin, an emerald silk dress, something inside her shifted. "Not this one," she said firmly, surprising the saleswoman. "The cut isn't right for my frame." The woman blinked, bewildered. "Perhaps you'd prefer something simpler?" "No," Isabella replied with a confidence she didn't know she possessed. "I'd prefer something with cleaner lines, perhaps in midnight blue, without so much embellishment." From his seat, Sebastian looked up, intrigued. The saleswoman, recalibrating her initial assessment, nodded and disappeared among the racks. What followed was a careful selection process. Isabella rejected the ostentatious designs, preferring elegant pieces with classic cuts. Each choice revealed a refined taste that baffled Sebastian. When she finally chose her gown for the gala, a deep blue, off-the-shoulder design that draped perfectly, even the saleswomen seemed impressed. "Where did you learn to dress like that?" Sebastian asked as they left the boutique, several bags in the driver's hands. Isabella kept her eyes forward. "Fashion magazines end up in the trash, and I have a good memory." Their next stop was a jeweler on Fifth Avenue. The owner, an elderly man with a European accent, greeted them personally. "Mr. Sterling, what a pleasure. Diamonds for the lady? Show her the entire collection, Yakov. She will decide." Under the showroom's studied lights, gems of every color glowed on black velvet. Isabella ran her fingers over them with a restrained reverence, but not the nervous excitement Sebastian had expected. "These," she said finally, pointing not to the largest diamond necklace, but to a pair of sapphire earrings with a subtle design. "An excellent choice," Yakov murmured, with genuine approval. "These are cashmere sapphires, very rare." At Per Se, one of the most prestigious restaurants in the country, Sebastian had reserved the chef's table. Isabella observed the minimalist space, the waiters moving in a silent choreography. When the tasting menu was served, Sebastian watched how Isabella handled the silverware. There was no hesitation, no furtive glances to see which fork to use first. Her movements were precise, elegant, natural. "I didn't know Per Se's signature duck consommé was aged for over 100 days, she commented, after tasting the restaurant's emblematic dish. Sebastian lowered his spoon mid-air. "How do you know that?" An enigmatic smile crossed Isabella's face. "I read a lot. In the trash, too." The question came out harsher than he intended. "Perhaps I'm not who you think I am, Mr. Sterling." Her voice was soft but firm, and for the first time Sebastian felt the roles reversing. He was the one being sized up. The rest of the afternoon was a whirlwind of a high-end salon, where her hair was transformed into a cascade of shining waves, and a session with a makeup artist to the stars. With each visit, each transformation, Isabella seemed not just to change physically, but to reclaim something she had lost. "Why do you live in a shelter?" Sebastian asked during the drive back to his penthouse where Isabella would prepare for the gala. The silence stretched for several seconds. "Because sometimes life takes everything from you in one fell swoop," she finally answered, "and because there are people there who need me." In the penthouse, Isabella gazed at the city view from the windows. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in orange and purple, lighting up the Statue of Liberty in the distance. "I'll pick you up at 8, Sebastian said, gesturing to the guest room where everything they had bought was waiting. "A stylist will come to help with the final touches." He paused at the door as if he wanted to say something more, but he just nodded and left. In his office, while reviewing the documents for his meeting with Jonathan Vance, Sebastian couldn't concentrate. The image of Isabella holding a wineglass with that perfect, natural posture haunted him. His phone rang. It was Jenna with the final details of the contract he hoped to close that night. "Is everything all right, sir?" his assistant asked, noticing his distraction. "Yes, of course," he answered automatically, but it wasn't true. What had started as a simple business arrangement, a pragmatic solution to a problem, was turning into something unsettling. Sebastian Sterling, the man who had built an empire by coldly analyzing every situation, was now in uncharted territory. At 8 o'clock sharp, he walked out of his bedroom, adjusting the knot of his tie, and there she was, waiting in the foyer. The midnight blue dress hugged her figure as if it had been made for her. The sapphires glittered at her ears, catching the light just as her eyes did. But it wasn't just the clothes or the jewelry, it was the way she stood, the serenity in her gaze. For the first time in many years, Sebastian Sterling was speechless. Sebastian Sterling was not a man of hunches or premonitions. His success was built on information, hard data, and meticulous analysis. That's why the unease he felt about Isabella Munro was so disturbing as he watched the sunrise from his 30th floor office. "I need you to run a background check." Sebastian's voice was tense over the phone. Maximum discretion and urgency. On the other end of the line, Theo Corbin, a former federal agent turned private investigator, took notes. For years, he had been Sebastian's source for intel on competitors and potential partners. Isabella Munro, currently living in a shelter in the Bronx, but she doesn't fit. Refined manners, knowledge inconsistent with her situation. I need to know who she really is, and I need it today. Meanwhile, in Sebastian's penthouse, Isabella was having breakfast on the terrace. The panoramic view of New York, with the Empire State Building piercing the morning haze, stirred mixed feelings in her: nostalgia, longing, and a deep resentment. "The stylist will arrive in an hour," the housekeeper informed her, interrupting her thoughts. "And the protocol coach will be here after that." Isabella nodded, maintaining her composure. In a few hours, she would have to transform into the perfect companion for a high society gala. The irony was not lost on her. At the most exclusive salon on the Upper East Side, Isabella underwent a full treatment. As masks, exfoliants, and exorbitantly priced creams were applied to her skin, she closed her eyes, remembering the last time she had experienced this kind of luxury. "You have beautiful skin," the esthetician commented. "But these hands, you've worked hard, haven't you?" Isabella looked at her hands, calloused from years of survival. "Every scar has a story," she replied simply. At noon, Theo Corbin met Sebastian in a discreet cafe in Soho. The investigator looked puzzled, which was unusual for him. "It's strange, boss. There's not much on her. No formal employment records for the past 5 years. No bank accounts. It's like she's been living off the grid. Education, family, nothing concrete, but I found something." Theo slid a folder across the table. A newspaper clipping from 6 years ago. Sebastian opened the folder. The yellowed headline from the Wall Street Journal read, "Dominion heiress vanishes after financial scandal, rocks construction giant." The photo showed a young woman receiving an academic award. Though her hair was different and the image quality was poor, the resemblance was undeniable. "Isabella Munro is the daughter of Robert Munro?" Sebastian felt a chill run down his spine. Dominion Construction Group had been one of the most powerful conglomerates in the country until its spectacular fall from grace. "Isabella Ann Munro," Theo confirmed. "Graduated with honors in business administration from Wharton. Spoke 3 languages. She was being groomed to take over the family empire when it all came crashing down. The Dominion case," Sebastian muttered, recalling the scandal that had rocked the nation. Robert Munro accused of massive fraud. Hundreds of investors ruined, the entire family implicated. Robert Munro committed suicide in pre-trial detention. His wife died a year later, officially from a heart attack, though rumors say it was from a broken heart. Their assets were seized, and their only daughter vanished, Sebastian completed, looking at the photo again. Penniless, with a tainted name, probably threatened by furious investors. Theo sipped his coffee. "I would have disappeared too. Anything else?" "One interesting detail. Among the primary victims of the Dominion fraud was a name you'll find familiar, Jonathan Vance." Sebastian looked up, stunned. "The same Vance I'm meeting tonight?" "The very same. He lost nearly $200 million in the collapse of Dominion Group. Rumor has it, he was one of the most vocal in pushing for Robert Munro's swift incarceration." Sebastian's analytical mind began working at high speed. Was it pure coincidence that he had found Munro's daughter, or was something else at play? In the penthouse, the protocol coach was reviewing the final details for the gala with Isabella. "Dinner is served at 9. Appetizer, first course, main course, dessert. Use the silverware from the outside in," the woman recited. "I know," Isabella replied quietly. "I also know the main toast is made after the main course, not with dessert, and that you should never leave the spoon in the coffee cup." The instructor looked at her surprised. "Very good. What else do you know about the protocol for these events?" Isabella gave a sad smile. "I know that the real conversations happen during the ball, not at the table. That the important deals are sealed in the dark corners of the ballroom, not under the crystal chandeliers. And that appearances are everything." When the instructor left, visibly perplexed, Isabella was alone in the guest room. Facing the full-length mirror, she contemplated her transformation. The professional makeup had highlighted her features, softening the traces that time and hardship had left on her face. Her hair, now perfectly styled, framed a face she had forgotten she possessed. But the real transformation was happening within. With every refined gesture she recovered, with every piece of knowledge she put back into practice, Isabella felt she was reclaiming fragments of her stolen identity. She touched the mirror with her fingertips, as if trying to reach the person in the reflection. "Isabella Ann Munro," she whispered, saying her full name for the first time in years. "You're still here." A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. Tonight was not for crying. Tonight, after 6 years hiding in the shadows, she would return to the ballrooms where she once belonged. And maybe, just maybe, it would also be a night for settling scores. In his office, Sebastian locked Theo's report in his safe. The information changed everything. Should he call it all off? Confront Isabella? Warn Vance? His phone rang. It was confirmation. Jonathan Vance would be at the gala with his entire entourage. The Hudson Yards contract depended on tonight. Sebastian looked at Isabella's photo again. In her eyes, even in that old picture, there was a determination he now recognized. If she had survived 6 years with the world against her, she was not someone to be taken lightly. "What are you planning, Isabella Munro?" he murmured to himself as the sunset painted his office in shades of gold. The answer would come that night, under the glittering lights of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Metropolitan Museum of Art glowed under the New York moon, its grand facade shining like a beacon over the city. Limousines and luxury cars lined up in front of the marble steps as the city's elite, financiers, politicians, celebrities, paraded up the red carpet. Sebastian Sterling checked his watch for the 10th time. 8:45 p.m. They had agreed to meet at 8 Wu. His leg bounced nervously as the driver circled the block again. "Should we return to the penthouse, sir?" the driver asked, noticing his agitation. "No. Wait 5 more minutes." In his mind, the possibilities multiplied. Had Isabella found out he knew her real identity? Had she run? Or worse, was she planning some kind of public scene? His phone vibrated. A text from Jonathan Vance. "Already in the hall. Eager to meet your date. We have much to discuss." Sebastian loosened his tie, feeling the knot choke him. His entire plan, the Hudson Yards project, the expansion of his company, it all hung by a thread. Then he saw her. Standing on the sidewalk, like an apparition under the streetlights, was Isabella. The midnight blue gown clung to her figure like a second skin, the fabric flowing like dark water to the ground. The sapphires glittered at her ears, but it was her eyes that captivated. Intense, deep, resolute. Sebastian got out of the car, momentarily forgetting his irritation. "You're late," was all he could manage. "I'm sorry," she replied, her voice so serene it contradicted any real regret. "I needed some time." As he offered her his arm, he noticed something different. It wasn't just her appearance, it was her presence. The fragile woman from the shelter was gone. In her place was a woman who radiated power, as if she were born to command these spaces. "You look transformed," he murmured as they ascended the steps. "Not transformed," she corrected. "Restored." The great hall of the Met was a spectacle of opulence. Beneath the soaring arches, hundreds of elegantly dressed guests dined among crystal chandeliers and arrangements of white orchids. A string quartet played classical pieces from a corner. As they entered, Sebastian felt all eyes turn to them. No, to her. Isabella walked with a natural grace that made the other women look like mere imitations. "Who is she?" he heard a well-known politician whisper. "I've never seen her before," his wife replied. "But there's something familiar about her." Jonathan Vance was waiting at the main table. In his late 60s, he was a legend in American business. His silver hair and rigid posture reflected a man used to getting what he wanted. "Sebastian, my boy," he greeted him with false camaraderie. "Finally, the Hudson Yards contract won't sign itself." His gaze shifted to Isabella, appraising her as he would a potential property. "And this lovely young lady is Isabella Munro," she introduced herself, extending her hand with a confidence that startled Sebastian. Something imperceptible shifted in Vance's eyes when he heard the surname, but his professional smile didn't falter. "A pleasure, Miss Munro." During dinner, Sebastian watched with growing amazement as Isabella navigated the conversation. She spoke of art with the curator of the MoMA, discussed international politics with an ambassador, and when the topic turned to business, she demonstrated a knowledge that left everyone at the table impressed. "The problem with real estate development in New York isn't a lack of capital, but the inequitable distribution of opportunities," she commented when Vance mentioned the Hudson Yards project. "The major consortiums absorb the government contracts, while small business owners are marginalized." Vance looked at her with genuine curiosity. "You speak like an expert, Ms. Munro. Are you in real estate?" "Let's just say I have some family experience in the field," she replied with an enigmatic smile. Sebastian, fearing the conversation was becoming dangerous, intervened. "Jonathan, about the terms of the contract." But Vance cut him off, now completely fascinated by Isabella. "You know, your surname is familiar. Are you related to the Munros of Dominion Group?" A tense silence fell over the table. Sebastian felt the air grow heavy, unbreathable. "Perhaps we could discuss this while we dance," Isabella suggested, with a calmness that contrasted with the tension of the moment. "The quartet is playing a beautiful waltz." To Sebastian's surprise, Vance smiled, pleased. It would be an honor. As the pair headed to the dance floor, Sebastian felt himself losing control of the situation. His carefully planned evening was unraveling before his eyes. On the floor under the dim lights, Vance led Isabella with the confidence of someone who had frequented these events his entire life. "So, Ms. Munro, who are you really?" he asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Isabella maintained her serene expression, as they twirled among the other couples. "I'm exactly who you're afraid I am, Mr. Vance." The older man kept his composure, but his hand tightened on Isabella's waist. "I don't know what you mean. I am Isabella Ann Monroe, daughter of Robert Monroe, the rightful heir to an empire that was stolen in a coup orchestrated by you and your associates." Vance paled slightly, but continued to dance as if nothing had happened. "That sounds like a very serious accusation." "It's not an accusation, it's a fact." Isabella's voice was clear, firm, without a trace of doubt. "My father didn't commit fraud. He was framed, manipulated, and then eliminated when he threatened to expose the truth." "Your father killed himself because he was guilty," Vance hissed, dropping his cordial facade. "And you should have stayed in the shadows, girl." "The shadows taught me patience, Mr. Vance, and they gave me time to gather proof." For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed the tycoon's eyes. "What proof?" "The bank records my father hid. The emails, the recordings of his meetings." Isabella was smiling now, a cold smile she hadn't shown before. "Did you really think a man like my father wouldn't take precautions?" From the table, Sebastian watched the scene with growing anxiety. What was supposed to be a formal dance seemed to have become something more intense. The faces of both reflected a tension that contrasted with the fluidity of their movements. When the music ended, Vance returned to the table, visibly disturbed. He excused himself briefly and left the hall with a hurried step, followed by two of his aides. Isabella returned to Sebastian's side, her face a mask of serenity that revealed nothing. "What did you say to him?" he asked in a low voice. "The truth." Her eyes met Sebastian's. "The truth you didn't dare ask me directly, even though you already knew." Sebastian felt a chill. "How did you know that I recognized your investigator following me this morning. You're not the first rich man to try and find out who I really am." Something in her tone made Sebastian wonder how much more she had discovered about him. "This whole thing," he muttered, gesturing to her presence at the gala. "Was it part of a plan?" Isabella's eyes shone with a mix of triumph and sadness. "Fate put us on the right path, Sebastian Sterling. I was looking for justice. You were looking for a contract. Only one of us will get what they came for tonight." The night that was meant to be Sebastian Sterling's corporate triumph was crumbling around him like a house of cards. In a corner of the majestic hall, he watched Jonathan Vance speak heatedly with his advisors, occasionally glancing toward Isabella. The Hudson Yards contract, his great opportunity, now seemed as distant as the stars shining over Central Park. "We need to talk," he said, taking Isabella by the elbow and guiding her to a terrace overlooking the park. The cool New York night air enveloped them. From there they could see the endless stream of headlights on Fifth Avenue and the illuminated grandeur of the city skyline. "Why didn't you tell me who you really were?" His voice sounded more hurt than angry. "Why keep it a secret?" Isabella looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and indignation. The moonlight outlined her profile, highlighting her beauty and the determination in her eyes. "Are you really asking me that? You, who found me at a shelter and bought me like someone buys a suit for one night?" The words were sharp, precise. "You saw me as a tool, Sebastian, a pawn in your business game. Why would I trust you?" Sebastian tried to step closer, but she took a step back. "It wasn't like that, at first maybe, but then..." "Then what?" she interrupted. "You were intrigued by the beggar with princess manners. Did you find me a fascinating mystery for your own entertainment?" The words stung more than Sebastian could have imagined, because they held a kernel of truth. At first she had been a practical solution, then a curiosity, but somewhere in the last 24 hours, she had become something more. "Listen," he said, trying to organize his thoughts. "I understand you using this event to get to Vance. I understand your thirst for justice, but you have to know that man is dangerous. The rumors about what happened to your father, they aren't rumors." Isabella's voice trembled for the first time. "My father didn't kill himself. They murdered him to silence him. And my mother didn't die of a heart attack. She died of grief, of humiliation, of watching everything we built get destroyed by the greed of men like Vance." Sebastian felt a chill. Isabella spoke with the certainty of someone who knew the truth, not the speculation of someone imagining it. "For 6 years, I lived in the shadows," she continued. "I changed my appearance, learned to be invisible. I worked as a waitress, a cleaning lady, whatever it took while I gathered proof, while I followed the money trail." Her eyes shone with determination and unshed tears. "And just when I was almost ready to take everything to the district attorney's office, you showed up. With your indecent proposal and your direct line to Vance. Sebastian stared at her, stunned. Are you telling me that all of this, accepting my proposal, was an opportunity I couldn't pass up? She finished. Fate putting me face to face with one of the men who destroyed my family. The weight of the revelation fell on Sebastian like a ton of bricks. He had been played, used as a means to an end. But strangely, he couldn't feel anger. Only an admiration mixed with a more complex feeling he didn't want to name. Inside the hall, the quartet had switched to a slow jazz number. Couples danced closely, oblivious to the drama unfolding on the terrace. I can help you, Sebastian said finally. I have influence, contacts in the justice system. We can get back what you lost. Isabella looked at him with an expression mixing sadness and disdain. Are you offering me a deal? Is it that easy for you to move from one business to another? It's not a deal, it's... Sebastian paused, unsure how to express what he was feeling. It's that I care about you. What happened to you? What they did to you. You care now that you know I'm not just some woman from a shelter, now that you know my name, my past. The bitterness in her voice was palpable. You're just like the rest of them, Sebastian. You only truly saw me when you found out who I really was. The words hit him like a slap. He wanted to deny it, but a part of him knew she was right. He had looked at her differently when he learned her surname, and that shamed him deeply. Just then, the terrace door opened. It was one of Vance's aides. Mr. Sterling, Mr. Vance would like to speak with you. Urgently. Sebastian looked at Isabella, then at the aide. Tell him I'll be with him in a moment. When they were alone again, he tried to take Isabella's hand, but she pulled it away. Go to your partner, she said coldly. Do what you came here to do. Isabella, please. I got what I needed from Vance tonight. His reaction, his fear. It's enough to move forward with my plan. What plan? What are you going to do? Isabella's gaze hardened. That's no longer your concern. Our arrangement is over. Sebastian felt a panic at the thought of her disappearing. You can't just leave. It's dangerous. If Vance suspects what you're planning, I've survived his threats for 6 years. I can handle one more night. Without giving him time to respond, Isabella walked toward the door. You used me, he said. A last desperate attempt to stop her. She paused and looked back over her shoulder. Just like you used me. The difference is I'm fighting for justice. You're just fighting for money. And with that, she re-entered the ballroom. Sebastian remained on the terrace, feeling something inside him tear apart. When he finally went back inside, Isabella was gone. She had vanished like a desert mirage, leaving only questions and an inexplicable void. Jonathan Vance was waiting for him by the bar, his face red with contained anger. Your date turned out to be an interesting character. Did you know who she was? Sebastian had to make a split-second decision. I had no idea, he lied. I hired her through an agency recommendation. Vance looked at him skeptically. The Hudson Yards contract is on hold. I have more pressing matters to attend to. With those words, the tycoon walked away, leaving Sebastian in the middle of the hall, alone and bewildered. At midnight, as the last guests departed and the quartet played its final notes, Sebastian Sterling walked out of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The city at night greeted him with its usual chaos, taxis searching for fares, street vendors selling hot dogs and pretzels, couples huddled together waiting for a ride. But he barely noticed. His mind was filled with Isabella, a woman who had entered his life as a business deal, and left it with him lost in a whirlwind of emotions he had never experienced. For the first time, Sebastian Sterling, the man who had always put business above all else, realized there were things money couldn't buy or fix. 3 days had passed since the gala at the Met. 3 days in which Sebastian Sterling, New York's most ruthless real estate developer, had been unable to focus on a single meeting. The Hudson Yards project was on indefinite hold. The calls from Jonathan Vance had abruptly stopped. And yet, none of it seemed to matter. Sir, you have the video conference with the Dallas investors in 5 minutes, Jenna reminded him, placing a folder on his desk. Sebastian nodded absently, his gaze lost on the city skyline. Cancel it. Excuse me? Jenna stared at him, shocked. In 5 years, he had never cancelled a meeting with potential investors. Tell them a family emergency came up. We'll reschedule for next week. When his assistant left, Sebastian picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. Theo, I need you to find someone urgently. His voice betrayed an anxiety that was foreign to him. Isabella Monroe. She disappeared after the gala. I need to know where she is. Over the next few days, Sebastian threw himself into an obsessive search. The shelter in the Bronx had been his first stop, but no one there would give him any information. The old man Isabella called Mr. Ellis had looked at him with distrust before saying in broken English, "You've done enough harm, boss. Leave her be." Private investigators scoured shelters, soup kitchens, and community centers. They checked hospitals and bus stations, fearing she had tried to leave the city after her confrontation with Vance. At night, Sebastian would find himself staring at the blue dress she had worn, now hanging in the guest room closet like a silent ghost. How could a woman he had known for barely a few days have affected him so deeply? The answer came a week later, when Theo called him during one of his few work meetings. "I found her," the investigator said without preamble. "She's working as a waitress at a cafe called The Corner Bite in Greenwich Village. Been there for 3 days." Sebastian cancelled the rest of his appointments and drove himself, something he hadn't done since college. He sped across the city, from the Upper East Side to the village, ignoring traffic lights and earning angry honks from other drivers. The cafe was a small, cozy place near Washington Square Park, with wooden tables and red and white checkered tablecloths. At this time of the afternoon, there were only a few customers, an elderly couple sharing a piece of pie, and a group of students with open books and coffee cups. And there she was. She wore a simple uniform, black skirt, white blouse, and an apron with the cafe's logo. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, and yet she had the same natural elegance that had captivated him from the very first moment. When Isabella saw him walk in, her eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with clear annoyance. She finished pouring a coffee for a customer before approaching him, notepad in hand, as if he were just any other patron. "What can I get you?" she asked with professional coldness. "To talk to you," Sebastian replied, his heart pounding. "Just 5 minutes. I'm working. I'll wait until your shift is over." Isabella glanced toward the kitchen, where an older woman was watching them curiously. "My shift ends in 3 hours, and I have plans after." "You're lying," he said with a faint smile, "but it doesn't matter. I'll wait anyway." And he did. For 3 hours, Sebastian Sterling, the man accustomed to everyone bending their schedules for him, waited patiently. He ordered coffee after coffee, ate a slice of cake he barely tasted, and watched Isabella work. Her efficiency, her kind manner with customers, the dignity with which she performed even the simplest tasks. When the last customer had left and the owner began cleaning the display cases, Isabella took off her apron and walked out the back door without looking at him. Sebastian left a $100 bill on the table and followed her. He found her walking quickly down a cobblestone street, lit by the ornate lampposts typical of the village. He caught up to her easily. "What do you want now?" she asked, not breaking her stride. "To get your investment back? The dress, the jewelry. I want to know if you're okay," he answered, with a sincerity that surprised even himself. "After the gala, with Vance knowing who you are, I was worried." Isabella stopped and looked him straight in the eye, searching for any sign of deceit. For an instant, her mask of indifference cracked. "To talk, to understand, maybe to help," he said, repeating the words he had rehearsed for days. "That's all I ask." After a moment's hesitation, she gave a slight nod. She led him to a small nearby park, less touristy than the main square. They sat on a bench under a century-old elm tree. "I've changed where I sleep 6 times this week," she began, looking at the fountain in the center of the park. "Vance has people looking for me. He knows I have evidence against him." Sebastian felt a pang of guilt. "I'm sorry. I never imagined I'd put you in danger." "It wasn't your fault," she replied, her voice softer. "I knew the risk I was taking by confronting him. I've been playing cat and mouse with men like him for 6 years." The tension between them slowly began to dissolve. In the distance, a saxophonist played a nostalgic melody that floated on the cool night air. "How did it all happen?" Sebastian asked. "Your family's fall, your life after—" Isabella took a deep breath, as if gathering the strength to unearth painful memories. "My father built Dominion Group from the ground up. It was our family's pride, an empire built on principles. When he started to expand, he needed investment partners. That's how he met Vance and his circle." Her eyes darkened with the memory. What he didn't know was that they were looking for a reputable company to use for fraudulent operations. They used Dominion Group as a front to launder drug money. Sebastian listened in silence, beginning to grasp the scale of the tragedy. "When my father found out what was happening, he threatened to expose them. 3 days later, he was found, having supposedly committed suicide in a holding cell before he could even testify. Her voice broke slightly. My mother and I lost everything. Our accounts frozen, properties seized, friends who turned their backs on us. And your mother. She couldn't handle the humiliation, the media harassment, the veiled threats. Her heart just gave out. Sebastian felt a lump in his throat. And you? I learned to survive, she answered with a mix of pride and sadness. I changed my appearance, used fake names. I worked whatever jobs I could find. Waitress, hotel maid, street vendor. But I never forgot who I was or what they took from me. My father taught me that dignity isn't in what you have, but in who you are. The saxophonist had moved closer. Isabella reached into her pocket and gave him a few dollars, with the same generous gesture Sebastian had seen her use with the old folks at the shelter. For 6 years, I gathered evidence, documents, testimony. I contacted loyal former employees, followed the money, until I had enough to take to the district attorney's office. A bitter smile crossed her face. But I needed to see Vance's face one last time before I did it. And then you showed up, with your offer that was impossible to refuse. And now what will you do? Sebastian asked. Isabella looked at him with a mixture of determination and vulnerability that completely disarmed him. Tomorrow, I'm submitting everything to the authorities. What happens after that? She shrugged, a gesture meant to show indifference but which betrayed her fear. Let me help, Sebastian said, tentatively taking her hand. This time she didn't pull away. I have contacts, resources. I can guarantee your safety. Why would you do that? Your contract with Vance, your Hudson Yards project. To hell with all of that, he replied, with a vehemence that surprised himself. There are more important things than business, Isabella. It took me too long to realize that. The following days unfolded like a strange dream for Sebastian Sterling. In the mornings, he accompanied Isabella to the district attorney's office, where she meticulously presented the evidence she had gathered over 6 years. In the afternoons, they would return to the cafe in Greenwich Village, where she insisted on finishing her shifts despite Sebastian's protests. I've never left a job without giving notice, she would explain while wiping down tables. I'm not about to start now. Sebastian watched her fascinated. This woman who had lost an empire still clung to principles that he, with all his money, had never truly valued. But while this new reality was unfolding, the old one hadn't disappeared. The calls from Jonathan Vance had returned, each one more insistent than the last. The Hudson Yards contract, once on hold, now seemed to be back on the table. The old fox is getting desperate, commented Roger Sullivan, Sebastian's personal lawyer and closest friend since college, as they shared a scotch in the private office of Sterling Developments. It seems his other partners are putting the squeeze on him. Sebastian stared at the dark amber of his drink. What do you know about the investigations against him? Roger, a thin man with thick-rimmed glasses and the characteristic pragmatism of a corporate lawyer, shrugged. Rumors mostly. But don't underestimate him. He's survived 3 different presidential administrations. He has powerful friends. And what if there's concrete evidence of his crimes? What are we talking about exactly? Roger looked at him with sudden focus. What do you know that you're not telling me? Sebastian hesitated, but he needed to confide in someone. He told him everything. Isabella's true identity, the evidence against Vance and his accomplices, the case she was building with the DA. Jesus, Sebastian. Roger took off his glasses and massaged the bridge of his nose. You've stepped into something huge. Vance isn't just some corrupt businessman. He has connections everywhere, even with the cartels. I know. And you're still helping this woman. It wasn't a question, but a statement of disbelief. Sebastian looked out the window toward the Hudson Yards skyline, its glittering towers so close he could almost touch them. The development he had dreamed of building. I've wanted that contract for years, Roger. It would double the company's value. My father never thought I'd get this far. So what's the problem? Roger interrupted. The problem is, I don't know if I want it anymore, not at that price. Sebastian drank the rest of his scotch in one gulp, feeling the familiar burn in his throat. Isabella has changed something in me. Seeing how she lost everything and still held on to her dignity, her principles, it makes me question every decision I've ever made. You sound like a man in love, Roger observed with a mix of amusement and concern. Sebastian didn't reply. Look, the lawyer continued, I get it, but let's be realistic. Vance has called you 3 times this week. The contract is still on the table. You could have both. Sign the deal and continue to support Isabella in her crusade. You don't have to choose. The words echoed in Sebastian's head long after Roger had left. Could he really have both? Or was he just trying to fool himself? That night, as he waited for Isabella to finish her shift at the cafe, Sebastian received a call from Jonathan Vance. "I need a final answer, Sterling." The tycoon's voice was tense. "My partners are getting impatient. The contract gets signed this Friday or we find another developer." Sebastian felt the weight of the decision on his shoulders. "I need to review the terms one last time." "Of course," Vance replied, his voice relaxing. "My office, tomorrow at 10. We'll close this thing once and for all." When he hung up, Sebastian realized Isabella was watching him from the cafe entrance. Her expression was unreadable. "It was him, wasn't it?" she asked as they walked under the full moon illuminating the streets of Greenwich Village. Sebastian nodded. "He wants to sign the contract this Friday." Isabella stopped in her tracks. "And what did you tell him?" "That I needed to review the terms tomorrow." A heavy silence fell between them. Finally, she spoke in a controlled voice. "I understand. It's your business opportunity. You don't have to explain anything to me." "It's not that simple, Isabella. This contract, I've worked for years to get it." "I know." Her voice sounded distant. "Everyone has their priorities." They walked the rest of the way in silence. Sebastian dropped her off at the small apartment he had insisted on renting for her safety, a place she had only accepted on the condition that she would pay back every dollar when she could. That night, in the solitude of his penthouse, Sebastian faced the most intense conflict of his life. How could he choose between the success he had always fought for and the woman who had changed the way he saw the world? The answer came the next morning, in the form of a text message from Mr. Ellis, the elderly man from the shelter with whom Sebastian had stayed in touch to keep tabs on Isabella's situation. "Your friend needs to be careful. Strange men are asking about her in the neighborhood. They say they work for some guy named Vance." Sebastian immediately called Isabella, but her phone was off. Worried, he drove to her apartment, only to find the landlady looking confused. "She left early, with a small bag," the woman explained. "She seemed upset." No one at the cafe had seen her. Desperate, Sebastian returned to his car and found an envelope tucked under the windshield wiper. Inside was a handwritten note. "Sebastian, I was told your meeting with Vance is confirmed. I don't need any more proof. You've chosen your path and I respect that. I ask you to respect mine and not look for me again. I don't need you to feign interest in me or my story. Go on with your business, as if we never met. Isabella." The shaky handwriting revealed the emotion she held back while writing it. Sebastian felt something break inside him. He pulled out his phone and called Roger. "I need you to cancel my meeting with Vance," he said, without preamble, "and contact our friends at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I need to know exactly what's happening with Isabella Monroe's complaint." "Are you sure?" Roger's voice was incredulous. "Sebastian, this contract—" "To hell with the contract, Roger. There are more important things." As he drove frantically through the city streets searching for Isabella, Sebastian Sterling finally understood the magnitude of his transformation. The man who a week ago thought only of closing deals was now willing to sacrifice everything to find a woman who had taught him the value of dignity and principle. The irony wasn't lost on him. He who had bought Isabella for a gala now discovered that what he had really gained was an invaluable lesson on the things money couldn't buy. Friday morning, the Vance Global headquarters glittered under the city sun. The imposing glass and steel tower, 40 stories high, dominated the Park Avenue skyline, a symbol of the power Jonathan Vance had amassed over decades. On the 38th floor, the boardroom had been meticulously prepared. Strategically placed floral arrangements, freshly brewed Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee, personalized leather binders for each attendee. Details mattered when signing a $500 million contract. At 10:45 a.m., Sebastian Sterling walked through the building's glass doors. He wore a custom-tailored navy suit, a gray silk tie, platinum cufflinks, the armor of a corporate warrior. His eyes, however, reflected the internal battle he had fought all night. Since Isabella's disappearance, he had mobilized all his resources to find her. His private investigators had checked hospitals, bus terminals, even shelters in neighboring states, but it was as if she had been swallowed by the earth. "Sebastian, everyone's waiting for you." Jonathan Vance greeted him in person, shaking his hand with more force than necessary. "My partners are impatient to meet the visionary who will transform Hudson Yards." The tycoon led him to the boardroom, where a dozen men in dark suits awaited. Familiar faces from New York's business world. Bankers, politicians turned entrepreneurs, heirs to old fortunes. Vance's inner circle. "Gentlemen, I present Sebastian Sterling," Vance announced. "The man who will turn our Hudson Yards plot into the most exclusive real estate complex in North America." Polite applause, calculated smiles, appraising looks. Sebastian knew the ritual. He had performed it countless times himself. He sat in the seat reserved for him, in front of a contract hundreds of pages long, already tabbed at the signature lines. A Mont Blanc pen, probably more expensive than most people's monthly salary, lay beside the document. "Before we proceed," Vance began, "allow me to explain the magnitude of this project." As the tycoon detailed technical specifications and financial projections, Sebastian studied the faces around the table. Powerful, self-satisfied men who believed the world belonged to them, men just like he had been until recently. His phone vibrated discreetly. It was a text from Roger. U.S. Attorney's Office cancelled Isabella's hearing. Pressure from above. She's still missing. Something crystallized in Sebastian's mind. Vance's network of power was more extensive than he had imagined. They could quash investigations, make evidence disappear, and people. And with a projected return on investment of 35% in the first 3 years, Vance was saying. "Now, if there are no questions, let's proceed with the signing." All eyes turned to Sebastian. The Mont Blanc pen felt like it weighed a ton as he picked it up. He thought of his father, who had built a small company that Sebastian had turned into an empire. He thought of the years of work, the sleepless nights, the personal sacrifices that had brought him to this moment. Then he thought of Isabella, of how she had lost everything, and yet retained something that he, with all his money, had never had: integrity. "Sebastian," Vance's voice broke through his thoughts. "Is there a problem?" Sebastian placed the pen back on the table and stood up slowly. "I can't sign this contract." An absolute silence fell over the room. Vance stared at him as if he had suddenly gone insane. "Excuse me? I don't think I heard you correctly." "I said I can't sign this contract," Sebastian repeated, his voice gaining strength. "I've recently come into possession of information that seriously compromises the integrity of this agreement, and more importantly, compromises my own values." A murmur went through the room. Vance maintained his composure, though a vein pulsed visibly in his temple. "If there's a clause you're uncomfortable with, we can revise it," he offered in a controlled voice. "This isn't about clauses, Jonathan." Sebastian looked directly into the eyes of the man who had destroyed Isabella's family. "It's about who I choose to do business with, and I've decided it won't be with someone capable of ruining innocent lives to expand his fortune." Vance's face transformed. The mask of the respectable businessman cracked, revealing for an instant the predator beneath. "Be careful what you're implying, boy," he warned in a low voice. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "On the contrary," Sebastian replied, picking up his briefcase. "Now I know perfectly." With those words, he walked to the door. He could feel the incredulous stares following him, the stunned silence of men who had never seen anyone refuse a deal of this magnitude. "You're making a huge mistake, Sterling," Vance's voice called after him. "No one turns their back on me like this." Sebastian paused at the threshold and turned one last time. "There's something worse than losing a deal, Jonathan. It's losing the chance to do the right thing when it's right in front of you." Walking out of the building, Sebastian took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he felt a strange lightness, as if he had set down a burden he didn't know he was carrying. His phone rang. It was Roger again. "We found her," he said without preamble. "She's at the cafe in the village. It seems she never really left, just went into hiding." Sebastian's heart leaped. Without a second thought, he got into his car and drove like a madman through the city traffic. He ran red lights, swerved around trucks, and ignored the angry honks of other drivers. Nothing mattered but getting to her. The cafe was nearly empty when he walked in. Isabella was at the back, wiping down tables with the same dignity that had defined her from day one. When she saw him, she froze. Her face was a canvas of surprise, distrust, and something else Sebastian couldn't identify. "What do you want now?" she asked, not hiding her resentment. "I just walked away from the biggest deal of my life," he said, approaching her slowly. "I rejected the Hudson Yards contract." Isabella stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do that?" Sebastian stopped in front of her. There were no more barriers, no pretenses, no masks between them. "Because I finally understood that some things are more important than money or power," he said simply. And because I understood what you were trying to show me all along, our dignity isn't in what we own, but in the choices we make. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Isabella offered a small smile, the first genuine one Sebastian had ever seen from her. You made the right choice, she said softly, but you didn't do it for me, did you? I did it for both of us, Sebastian replied, for the man I want to be. Winter arrived in New York with an unusual intensity. As people bundled up against the cold, the atmosphere in Sebastian and Isabella's now shared office space was warm and vibrant. What had begun as a tactical alliance had become a shared mission. We've got something big, announced Roger Sullivan, walking into the conference room where Sebastian and Isabella were reviewing documents. The lawyer, now fully committed to their cause, dropped a folder on the table. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, all linked to Vance and his partners. Isabella took the documents, her hands trembling. For 3 months they had worked tirelessly, following every lead, contacting former Dominion Group employees, tracking suspicious bank transfers. This timeline matches when they accused my father of embezzling funds, she murmured, her voice a mix of excitement and resolve. They had it all planned from the beginning. Sebastian came over and placed a hand on her shoulder. The gesture, simple yet intimate, reflected the transformation of their relationship. There were no more barriers between them, only a common purpose. With this, plus the testimonies we've gathered, we have enough to reopen the case, Sebastian said. This time, they won't be able to silence it so easily. Days later, in the office of the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Attorney Carmen Aguilar listened intently as Isabella and Sebastian presented their evidence. Unlike previous attempts, this time they had the media and legal backing that only someone with Sebastian's resources could provide. The case is solid, the attorney admitted after reviewing the files, but you must understand, you're going up against very powerful people. This won't be quick or easy. We know, Isabella replied firmly. I've waited 6 years. I can wait a little longer. As they left the federal building into a typical January drizzle, Isabella stopped and looked at Sebastian. Why are you doing all of this? She asked. You've risked your company, your reputation, even your safety. Why? Sebastian watched the raindrops on Isabella's face, wondering how to answer a question that was so simple, yet so complex. Because I learned from you that money is only valuable when you use it for something that truly matters, he said finally. I used to measure my success in numbers and contracts. Now I measure it in the difference I can make. The answer seemed to satisfy her. A silent understanding had grown between them, one that transcended words. That night, Sebastian got a call that would change everything. CBS wants to interview you both, Roger announced. They're doing a 60 Minutes special on corporate fraud, and your case is the centerpiece. They shared a look of astonishment. Are you ready for this? Sebastian asked. Once your story is out there, there's no going back. Isabella took a deep breath. It's time for the truth to be known. For my father, my mother, and for all the families who suffered. The report, titled House of Cards, Fraud and Corruption on Wall Street, aired in primetime 2 weeks later. Featuring testimonies from repentant former executives, leaked documents, and Isabella's heart-wrenching story, the program exposed not just the fall of Dominion Group, but a web of corruption that implicated some of the most respected names in American business. The reaction was immediate and massive. The hashtags Justice for Monroe and Dow Vance is corrupt trended nationally. Other news outlets picked up the story, digging deeper. I just got word, Roger said, bursting into the apartment where they were watching the fallout on the nightly news. The U.S. Attorney has issued arrest warrants for Vance and 3 of his partners. The SEC has frozen their assets. Isabella covered her face, overwhelmed with emotion. 6 years of fighting alone, of living in the shadows, were finally paying off. This is just the beginning, Sebastian cautioned, though he couldn't hide his own excitement. They'll fight back with everything they have. And they did. The following months turned the Monroe-Vance case into a legal battlefield. But something had changed. The public, usually apathetic to corporate scandals, had connected with Isabella's story. Sebastian, in turn, was transformed in the public eye. The once ruthless tycoon was now seen as a champion of ethical business practices. Building fortunes at the expense of others isn't success, it's predation, he declared at a university lecture. True success is creating value that benefits everyone. At night, When the stress of the case became overwhelming, they found refuge in each other's company. What began as a transaction between a billionaire and a woman in need was slowly becoming a deep bond, built on mutual admiration. "I never thought I'd fall for the man who bought me for a gala," Isabella confessed one night, as they shared a bottle of scotch on the roof under the starry city sky. Sebastian looked at her, surprised by the sudden confession. "And I never imagined the woman I hired for one night would end up saving my life," he replied, lacing his fingers through hers. No more words were needed. The kiss that followed sealed a silent promise. They would face whatever came next, together. The cold cost-benefit analysis that had always guided Sebastian's decisions had been replaced by something more profound, the certainty that some things, like love and integrity, were priceless. Spring arrived in New York with an explosion of cherry blossoms and a headline that shook the national news: Jonathan Vance and partners sentenced to 15 years for fraud and money laundering. In Judge Miller's courtroom, Isabella officially received the notification. A portion of her family's estate would be restored: properties, frozen accounts, and financial compensation that amounted to a considerable sum. Overnight, the woman who had slept in shelters was a millionaire again. "Poetic justice," the judge remarked. "Your father would be proud." That afternoon, as they walked through Central Park, Sebastian noticed Isabella seemed distant. "Are you okay?" he asked. "You should be celebrating." Isabella smiled faintly. "I'm thinking about Mr. Ellis, Mrs. Peterson, and everyone who helped me when I had nothing." They stopped by the lake. "What are you going to do now?" Sebastian asked. "You could have your old life back. A mansion in the Hamptons, the travel, everything they took." She shook her head. "That life is gone. And honestly, I don't want it back." "Then what?" "I want to use these resources to help people who are where I was," she answered. "To create something that offers not just a handout, but a real chance to rebuild." Sebastian's eyes shone with admiration. "I have some properties on the Lower East Side that could work as a headquarters," he offered, "and contacts in education for job training programs. You'd help me with this? Wouldn't you rather go back to your real estate developments?" He took her face in his hands. "Don't you get it yet? My life changed the day I found you. There's no going back, and I don't want to." Thus, the New Dawn Foundation was born. The first center opened in a restored building on the Lower East Side, offering temporary housing, a soup kitchen, free legal aid, and job training workshops. Mr. Ellis became one of the first coordinators. "Never doubted you, kid," he told Isabella on opening day. "Knew you had a light inside you, even when it was all dark outside." In the fall, Sebastian took Isabella to the rooftop of the Foundation's building. He had prepared a simple dinner. "Remember the first night we met?" he asked. "How could I forget? You offered me $20,000 to be your date," she replied with a playful smile. "And you demanded 25. I should have known then you were no ordinary woman." They both laughed. "I have something for you," Sebastian said, pulling a small box from his pocket. It didn't contain a ring, but an old-fashioned key. "What is it?" "The key to my father's first office, where he started with nothing and built something meaningful." He looked at her intently. "I want to build something with you, Isabella. Not just the foundation, a life." 2 months later, they were married in an intimate ceremony in the community center's garden. They were surrounded by the people who truly mattered: the shelter residents, foundation volunteers, and a few true friends. Mrs. Peterson, at 78, organized a group of ladies to cook up a feast of BBQ and mac and cheese that no gourmet chef could have matched in meaning. A local jazz band played. During the toast, Roger, acting as best man, raised his glass. When Sebastian told me he'd hired a stranger for a business gala, I thought he'd lost his mind. Now I see that maybe he did, but he found something far more valuable: his heart. "You know what's most extraordinary?" Isabella whispered as they danced their first dance. "We had to lose everything to find what really matters." "And what's that?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "That true wealth isn't measured in property or bank accounts. It's measured in the lives we touch, in the legacy we build together." She rested her head on his shoulder. "And in loving someone who makes us want to be a better person every day." As night fell over New York City, Sebastian and Isabella continued to dance. Not just the waltz of their wedding, but the beginning of a new life. What had started as a cold business arrangement had blossomed into something neither thought possible: a true love, built on the certainty that sometimes we find our destiny in the very places we least expect to look. Spring arrived in New York City with an explosion of cherry blossoms and a headline that shook the national news. Jonathan Vance and partners sentenced to 15 years for fraud and money laundering. After an 18-month legal battle, the Monroe case had reached its conclusion. In Judge Miller's chambers, Isabella officially received the notification a portion of her family's estate would be restored. Properties unjustly seized, frozen accounts, and financial compensation that amounted to a considerable sum. Overnight, the woman who had slept in shelters was a millionaire again. "It's poetic justice," the judge remarked while signing the documents. "Your father would be proud." Sebastian, who had stood by her side throughout the entire process, watched in silence. He knew this feeling of triumph well, but he also knew that endings aren't as simple as they seem in the movies. That afternoon, as they walked through Central Park among families enjoying the Sunday and vendors selling cotton candy, Sebastian noticed Isabella seemed distant, thoughtful. "Are you okay?" he asked, taking her hand. "You should be celebrating." Isabella smiled faintly. "I'm thinking about Mr. Ellis, Mrs. Peterson, and everyone who helped me when I had nothing. About the single mothers at the shelter who shared their food with me, even when they barely had enough for their own children." They stopped by the lake where ducks swam, oblivious to human dramas. A pretzel cart passed by, its vendor calling out with a sound that was part of the city's audio landscape. "What are you going to do now?" Sebastian finally asked. "You could have your old life back, the mansion in the Hamptons, the travel, everything that was taken from you." Isabella shook her head. "That life doesn't exist anymore, and honestly, I don't want it back." "Then? I want to use these resources to help people who are where I was," she answered with determination. "To create something that offers not just immediate help, but real opportunities to rebuild." Sebastian's eyes shone with admiration. This woman never ceased to amaze him. "I have some properties on the Lower East Side that could serve as a headquarters," he offered, "and contacts in the education sector for job training programs." Isabella looked at him with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "You'd help me with this? Wouldn't you rather go back to your real estate developments and corporate projects?" Sebastian took her face in his hands. "Don't you get it yet? My life changed the day I found you. There's no going back, and I don't want to." Thus, the New Dawn Foundation was born. What started as an idea during a walk in Central Park materialized in weeks of intense work. Isabella brought her first-hand knowledge of the real needs of vulnerable people. Sebastian contributed his administrative expertise and business contacts. The first center opened in a restored building on the Lower East Side, an area known for its history of marginalization. It offered temporary housing, a soup kitchen, free legal aid, and job training workshops. Mr. Ellis, with his plain-spoken wisdom, became one of the first coordinators. "Never doubted you, kid," he told Isabella on opening day. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were different. You had a light inside you, even when everything outside was dark." The foundation quickly gained notoriety. National media covered the story of the heiress who had lived on the streets and was now helping others get off them. Business leaders, inspired by Sebastian's example, began to develop genuine social responsibility programs, not just ones designed to improve their image. In the fall, as the crisp air settled in, Sebastian took Isabella to the rooftop of the foundation's building. He had prepared a simple dinner with candles and the panoramic view of the city as the only luxury. "Remember the first night we met?" he asked, pouring scotch into small glasses. "How could I forget? You offered me $20,000 to be your date," she replied with a playful smile. "And you demanded 25. I should have known then that you were no ordinary woman." They both laughed, finally free from the weight of painful memories. "I have something for you," Sebastian said, pulling a small box from his pocket. It didn't contain a ring, as Isabella might have expected, but an old-fashioned key. "What is it?" "The key to my father's first office, where he started with nothing and built something meaningful." Sebastian looked at her intently. "I want to build something with you, Isabella. Not just the foundation, a life." 2 months later, they were married in an intimate ceremony in the community center's garden. There were no grand luxuries or the high society guest list that would have befitted their social positions. Instead, they were surrounded by the people who truly mattered: the shelter residents, the foundation's volunteers, and the few true friends who had stood by them through difficult times. Mrs. Peterson, at 78 and with an enviable vitality, organized a group of ladies to cook up a feast of BBQ and mac and cheese that no gourmet chef could have matched in meaning. The children from the educational program made colorful paper streamers that decorated the courtyard. A local jazz band played love songs that got everyone dancing. During the toast, Roger, acting as best man, raised his glass. When Sebastian told me he had hired a stranger for a business gala, I thought he'd lost his mind. Now I see that maybe he did, but he found something far more valuable: his heart. Laughter and applause mixed with a few discreet tears. Sebastian took Isabella's hand, marveling at how destiny sometimes works in the most unexpected ways. "You know what's most extraordinary?" Isabella whispered as they danced their first waltz as a married couple. "That we had to lose everything to find what really matters." "And what's that?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "That true wealth isn't measured in properties or bank accounts. It's measured in how we touch the lives of others, in the legacy we build together." Isabella rested her head on his shoulder. "And in loving someone who makes us want to be better people every day." As night fell over New York City, its millions of lights shining like earthbound stars, Sebastian and Isabella continued to dance, not just the waltz of their wedding, but the beginning of a new life shared. What had started as a cold business deal between a lonely billionaire and a woman in desperate circumstances had blossomed into something neither of them believed possible. A true love, built on a foundation of mutual respect, admiration, and the certainty that sometimes we find our destiny in the very places we least expect to look.